Hello again guys, it's Jed Skeptic Media, and today I'll be making a video which I didn't think I'd be making, but because of the comments and one of my previous videos, I thought I could only do it justification by articulating a wee bit more in my own video. And just to make this clear guys, I'm not religious in the way I follow religion. I've got my own belief system. I can't prove it to anyone, it's just a belief system, but I have my own. But if you wonder why the things that happen in this world, the wars, all the control, the domination, it really comes down to all this stuff, scriptures. And like it or not, this is what the powers that be believe in. They believe in all this stuff. And you could say it's all mumbo jumbo. Scripture could be this, scripture could be that, and that could be true. Scripture could be mumbo jumbo, but at the end of the day, these people that control us believe in all this. Just like JLB said to the other day there to was it Russian vids in a hangout. The fact that the devil might exist, the devil might not exist. Either way, whoever's controlling this world believe in some kind of entity or something. They believe in something, and it's written in scriptures. So believe it or not, it's up to you if you want to believe it or not, but these people follow all this. And it makes you realise why there's this war in Iraq, Syria. Yeah, it makes you realise what's going on. It's a missing piece to what's going on in our reality. So you could ignore this if you want, but at the end of the day, it all comes kind of down to these, this ideology in scripture, from the Bible, from Judaism. And it's not that scripture's predicting anything. I don't think scripture can predict the end of days and all that. I think the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, they're more like instruction books. It's like an instruction book for the powers that be, so they know how to control us, and it's like an instruction book for the average person to be known how to be controlled. It's like an instruction book, and they're just following instructions. So everything we see today in the news, all the wars, all the deceit, all the control, it comes down to this. If everyone's wondering why is this Jewish thing, that's what got me into it. I was never really into Judaism or Christianity, but I was really into current affairs and what was happening in the world. And when you see things like the support for Israel and things like that, you'd wonder why. Why do we in America, like the UK, America, Australia, Canada, why do we support this Middle Eastern country that to the rest of the world shouldn't exist? But why have we got in our heads that this place should exist? Our governments believe it all. Listen to Obama, he believes he's from some Egyptian pharaoh or some shit like that. They believe all these things. The powers that be that control us believe their bloodline comes from these tribes. And it started with Abraham, when it comes to the whole bloodline thing with Judaism. And it went on to Isaac, but I'm sure Abraham had another son called Ishmael. That's what formed the Arab nations. But we'll just stick to Isaac, because this is kind of the foundation of Western civilization. So Isaac had Jacob and Esau. Jacob would have he'd go on to father the 12 tribes. Esau, he gave up his birthright. He was a twin of Jacob. He actually had he was the real birthright of the bloodline at first. But because in the Bible it reads that Esau was out hunting, he came back, he was starving, he never had anything to eat. He said to Jacob, my brother, give me some stew, or whatever it was he was eating. and Jacob blackmailed him practically. A lot of people see Jacob as the bloodline, the real bloodline, but I'm not sure. When you read the scriptures, it sounds like Jacob blackmailed Esau for the bloodline, because Jacob said to Esau, "Sure, I'll give you a plate of stew as long as you give me your birthright." And Esau didn't care about his birthright, didn't care much for it, so he gave it up. He said, "Have the birthright. I just want a bowl of stew, or I'm gonna die." So that was from that day on. When Esau sold his birthright, Jacob was the main bloodline. So from Jacob, he had these wives: Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah, and Leah. And you can see here the tribes, the sons that came from each wife. And we'll stay on the Rachel side, because this is where the Western culture seems to want to get involved, through this line, through the Joseph line. Because during Bible times, obviously, that these tribes got spread out throughout Europe by the Assyrians, and the tribe from Joseph, it says in the Bible, they would lose their identity, they would forget who they were, and they would just blend in with the rest of the Gentiles. So it says in the Bible. And then they'll eventually rise up. But according to the Bible, when all these tribes get back together in Israel, that's the end of the world. And that's, even if you are Jewish or not, or even if you think you're a descendant of one of the Israelites, you could be descended from the Israelites. It's one of these things. It's strange, because apparently after the Exodus, this is where all the tribes went. This is according to the scholars, but I don't seem to believe this. They seem to believe that this whole culture began in the Middle East, and I can't get my head around that. I can't get how white, red-haired men would begin in this part of the world. Because without looking at scriptures or anything like that, look at the skin colour, look at the genetic traits. It'd be strange if you were born in Northern Europe with black skin and black hair, because that doesn't make sense to your environment unless you had an African father. Like, over evolution and over time, your genetics change. So the melanin gene becomes weaker because you're not getting as much sunlight. So that's how the red-haired gene arose. Apparently, it was a mutation in the melanin gene. But for all you know, the dark gene could be a mutation of the red gene for the heat. It could be the other way around. And I know that Brit Am, one of my subscribers, and there's a lot of people that believe that the tribes got spread out through Europe, and that's how it started. But I think this whole Celtic Hebrew connection started in the West and spread, because this is where the highest account for Celtic culture and red hair comes from. This part of the world. I can't see how it could just appear here and then get pushed across Europe. I think it appeared here, spread as far as the Middle East and even North Africa, and then they got pushed back again. And they've maybe been going back and forward for quite a while, and maybe this is what the whole Israeli state's all about, is them trying to claim it back. But it doesn't do this video any justice doing 10 minutes, so I'm going to do a series. I'll do a couple more to try and articulate what I'm trying to get across here. Okay, guys? So I'll see you in part 2. Thanks. Okay, guys, so I've quickly went through the tribes, the Exodus, how they got spread out through Europe, they've got spread out through Germany. All the different tribes. Apparently, each tribe went to a different country. So Denmark, the name Denmark comes from the Dan tribe. You can see here that there's the Dan tribe here, like Denmark, Dane, the Danube River. A lot of names with Dan is related to this tribe, and this is meant to be the Scandinavian tribe from Dan. For some reason, I think Britain is this line. It's Joseph. So in France, I think France is meant to be Reuben. Simeon, that could be the Welsh part, but I think they could have got Romanised. Maybe the bloodline isn't strong, because that's the thing. Rome never really got into Scotland. They did get into Scotland, but they didn't conquer Scotland. They tried to, but they couldn't, because Scotland fought guerrilla warfare, just like the Americans in Afghanistan. The Scots didn't fight in armies. The Scots fought in guerrilla groups and ambushes. So the Romans could never properly conquer Scotland, and they could never properly conquer the blood, because after you conquer a country, different bloodlines mixed in and different people mix with populations. So I think Scotland could have still have quite a strong connection to the Celtic Hebrews. And this whole Hebrew, I think the Celtic language was first and probably morphed into Hebrew over the Middle East. There's lots of ties to it, but the real Israelites, this could be the claim here, and I'm not saying it is, it's still speculation, but the real Israelites, they got banned from Israel and scattered across Europe. Well, I'm not saying that these countries are the Israelite countries like Britain, France, but the people apparently spread to these countries, so there's meant to be a bloodline in there. And it got me thinking about blood, because my son, I've got the ginger gene. We've got the ginger gene quite strong. I've got a ginger beard, and my son is bright red hair. And it just gets you thinking, like, where does that gene just reappear? Because me and my missus, we're both auburn, dark, and we have a ginger son, but it's a gene that hides. It's one of these dormant genes that pops up now and again. You just have to be both carrying the gene, and it'll pop up. So it got me thinking about everyone knows the red hair is related to Celtic culture, and you can see in this map the strongest parts of Celtic culture being the darkest, being the strongest areas of Celtic culture, and the lighter parts being the less. And you can see here Britain, Ireland, this side of France, Spain, because apparently once the tribes spread through Europe, they spread into Spain, and then from Spain they went to Ireland. This is what the scholars believe. And from Ireland they went to Scotland, and Scotland they went to England. And this is the whole with the Knights Templar, the Crusades. The Crusades, I think, was just what we're doing right now. We think that we took that place and we've been banned and we want it back. And the scriptures say it's ours, so we want it back. It doesn't matter if the scriptures were written by whoever, but it's an instruction book. It's telling that these nations have to take back Israel. It's written in the book. And once everyone comes together into Israel, that's the end of days. So let's just hope that we don't unite. But there's a good chance that the Celtic culture and Hebrew, the Jewish, are connected. The Gaelic language has lots of similarities to the Hebrew. So has English got similarities to Hebrew. But the Gaelic language is similar. And the genetic pool, I seem to find there's similarities. I noticed in Jewish scriptures that they had the Maccabee uprising. I think it was against, was it Herod? But I think Herod was a Jew that went with Rome. He idolised Rome, so he turned his back on Judaism. But I think he was Jewish, Herod. But the Jews there rebelled against him and had an uprising. It was called the Maccabee uprising. A Maccabee. How Scottish a word does that sound? And then you look at just movies and just modern culture, like ginger hair. For some reason, ginger hair is associated with Jewish people. If you go back to the Middle Ages, they seen people with red hair as having Jewish ties. So why is there this red hair Hebrew Gaelic connection? It's strange. It's strange. And then you see the wars going on. You see how much commitment we want to give these people. You wonder why we spend millions and millions of pounds trying to protect this area and take it over. Well, I think it's all down to this. I think she's got a line of King Solomon. She thinks she's part of these tribes. This is why she's got a rule over us. She rules over us by the power of God, by nothing else. No elections, just bloodline. That's because she believes. If she didn't believe this, she would just stand down. But I think most of the royal families, Norway, Britain, Spain, France used to have a royal family, but I think most of these royal families think they descend from these tribes. But because the tribes were split up into so many groups, like you see here, who is who? Who's who? Because each tribe didn't have the right to the bloodline. Each tribe they had their own destinies. But I think this tribe of Joseph, this was the true. I think this was meant to be the true bloodline, because they stuck together. They didn't go outside their own peoples. So I think they're seen as a stronger connection to Celtic and Hebrew culture, this Joseph. And if you look in Scottish, everywhere in Scottish culture, even the lion rampant, the flag of Scotland, it's a red lion standing up. It's called the lion rampant if you search it. Well, type in the Lion of Judah, and there's similarities. You're thinking, what is this? But that Lion of Judah might not mean that the Scots are from that tribe. It might mean that Lion of Judah is ruling over us. I think the Scots are the unicorn rather than the lion. But I think that image of the lion rampant is like a rub in the face for the Scots. Because heraldry, we know that it's all the aristocracy that created the heraldry and the flags and all the symbols that go with their bloodline. So, but it's an interesting subject, and it could explain why there's a lot going on in the Middle East, right? For thousands of years, why all this stuff has been going on in the Middle East. But I don't think it's because the Celtic or the Hebrews or the Israelites started in Israel. I think these people, this area has always been dominated by brown, darker Arabs and things like. I think even the stories of the Nephilim, like the giants, and then the people breeding with the giants. These giants could be just Northern Europeans. They say they were red. Red like devils. Well, they had white skin. They were in a hot country. Well, when I'm out in the sun, my skin goes red. So, and I've got ginger hair. Well, gingerish hair. It gets lighter in the sun. So we could be seen as red. So I think the Celtic culture spread across as far as here and probably retreated because the people were sick of them. Sick of their, like, why are we being ruled by these white, red-haired guys? We're not having this anymore. And even as far as Egypt. Maybe they go as far as Egypt and then got kicked out. But there's definitely a connection between the Hebrew and the Celtic culture. I don't know, and I think this whole Jew and Israelite could be different things. I think the Israelites don't know they're the real bloodline, and the Jews are the ones trying to take over. But it's a massive subject, and I recommend you look into it. Part 3. So we can see here, they've gave us a map of the spread of Celtic culture. The darker areas, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, 75% Celtic culture. So you can see these are the areas that have got the strongest connections to Celt and the Celts. The rest of the world, it's this area, and the red hair gene is similar, as you can see here. Obviously, the darker parts is stronger. It's the orange. You see here. So there's a connection between the Celtic and the red hair. There's no doubt about that. Celts have red hair. That's part of the genes. Just like Africans have black hair and black skin, Celts have red hair and white skin. Simple. They come from a cold country. They've adapted. The Africans have adapted to their climate, so they have characteristics that help them in their environment. So having red hair and pale skin helps Northern Europeans, helps us with the lack of sun, whilst it's the opposite in the hotter countries. So to avoid that fact, so there you go, you've got the red hair gene in the culture, seems to tie in. Then the language of Gaelic. Gaelic, the languages spoken by the Celts of Ireland, Scotland and the Isle of Man, a branch of Celtic. So I think the Celtic and the Hebrew, there's a connection there with Israelites. The cult of Aton Aten left Egypt along with the Levites, the elite priesthood class who had served and lived alongside them at Ahetaten, Tel Amarna and Avers, Giza and Heliopolis. These tribes are put before us today as the Israelites, the supposed Jews of history. Those who became known later as Jews were, however, originally neither Israelites nor Hebrews. The name Hebrew comes from Ibaru or Ibiru or Abri or Abari, an ancient Egyptian term for the wise ones. The word rabbi is a rendition of or variant of this ancient name. The Ibaru were members of the elect and had a strong bloodline connection to the house of the Pharaoh. This word Ibaru had a similarity to Apiru, Egyptian Apir, which meant wanderer or shepherd or foreigner. This unfortunate similarity of etymology has caused a great confusion, but has favoured the machinations of those elites who crave to obscure the truth of their ancestry. So here we have the Israelite dispersion, facts about Ireland, and the DNA link between Ireland and Spain. This I kind of can relate to this because I'm half Scotch, half Irish, and if you've no noticed, guys, that a third American presidents are Scotch-Irish. And that's another thing that got me thinking about the whole Jewish Celtic connection. If you look at Hollywood, and we all know that they say that the Jews run Hollywood, but if you look at the Hollywood actors, again like your Adam Sandlers, and just look at your Ben Still, just look at they're all Jews, and they're not allowed to marry outside of the Jewish unless they're Celtic. You'll notice that often Jews will marry into Celtic bloodlines. Why is that? Why is there this sort of why is this allowed if they're so strict? Because I think that the Celts were a form in the same bandy people. It's just who they've mixed with, who's purer than who. Obviously the royalty that runs this world, they think they're the purest of blood because they've inbred with each other. Well, the other ones pass their blood around. We'll have a wee read of this one. Our view of Gaelic is based on an east to west movement of civilization which has been proved by archaeologists and historians to be wrong. The original civilization was established in the British Isles and points west, Lemuria, Atlantis, and moved east. Thus what many believed to be Hebrew words spread to Ireland and other parts of the British Isles as Gaelic was actually Gaelic, which spread from the British Isles and renamed Hebrew. See that word Hebrew, we've got the Hebrides, and we've got Hibernia for Ireland, this Heb word. The following terms are archaeological sites predate the earliest Hebrew writings and are proof that these Gaelic words existed in Ireland before Moses, Abraham and the Great Flood. Number 1. Torah, a city, the capital of the Druids, and the name which God's law is known. Hill of Torah, the ruins of the city Torah, named as Abraham's father. Olam Fodlah, Leah Fail, known as Jacob's Pillar, travelled to Scotland as a stone of destiny, now in Westminster Abbey. Celtic crosses which predate Jesus. Nazi symbol on Celtic crosses which predate Jesus. Ogham script found in Irish, Scottish, Native American and Mayan temples. Tia Tepe, Scotta, daughter of Nefertiti, after whom Scotland was named. Rabbi from the Gaelic word Abarai, and Magi from the three wise men who visited Jesus, in Latin for Druids. Irish of the Republic of Ireland, who are 98% Catholic, know that there's something not quite right about Catholic history. They question why the Church would attempt to isolate people from the Hill of Torah by putting a fence around it and by building a cathedral at the entrance, complete with a statue of St. Patrick, forcing tourists to virtually go through this church to get to the Hill of Torah. They question why they renamed it Hill of Tara, a word which is meaningless. And as you can see here, guys, there's plenty about the Hebrew-Celtic connection. I'll read some of it now, but it's a lot of stuff. I might make a couple of more videos just reading it, so you guys don't have to. Hebrew-Celtic connection, a missing link and fulfilled prophecy. In the 8th century BC, the Assyrian Empire was at its peak, and its armies threatened the nations on the western Mediterranean seaboard, including Israel. The Assyrians were a brutal, fearsome people, the most terrible, perhaps, in all Earth's history. Conquered lands and literally plundered everything of value, even people who were taken to slavery in foreign lands. The wall murals of the Assyrians, some of which now bedeck the British Museum in London, depict scenes of horrible savagery and torture. Men were sometimes skinned alive or impaled on poles to slowly die outside the gates of the city. Famed archaeologist Sir Austin Henry Layard rediscovered and unearthed the ancient Assyrian cities and graphically described the scenes on the wall murals he found. Captives were stretched naked at full length on the ground, and whilst their limbs were held apart by pegs and cords, they were being flayed alive. Beneath them were the unfortunate victims undergoing abdominal punishments. The brain of one were apparently being beaten out with an iron mace, whilst an officer held him by the beard. A torturer was wrenching the tongue out of the mouth of a second wretch who had been pinioned to the ground. The bleeding heads of the slain were tied round the necks of the living, who seemed reserved for still more barbarous tortures. Discoveries in the ruins of Assyria and Babylon. So you can check that out, it's got a reference to it. Inhabitants of Palestine in those days were well aware that the Assyrians would only too soon conduct a similar brutal warfare against the eastern shore of the Mediterranean. Would not large numbers of Israelites migrate westward by land and sea to find safety for themselves and their families outside the Assyrian sphere of influence? Historical evidence indicates that did indeed happen. The authoritative Dictionary of Christ and Gospels relates large numbers of Israelites have been carried away captive by the Assyrians and Babylonians, but a much larger dispersion was due to voluntary emigration. Yes, most Israelites migrated voluntarily out of Palestine, then even the large number of those taken away in the Syrian-Babylon captivities, as it came clear that the invasion and conquest by Assyria was imminent. Hebrews and Phoenicians emigrated westwards to distant lands by the many hundreds of thousands, forming the foundation of European civilization. Right guys, I'm running out of time, so I'll make another one and I'll read some more of this for you. These historical facts have been known for centuries, and the plethora of books by leading historians has documented the Phoenician origin of Western civilization. Historians have given the Phoenicians most of the credit for this emigration from Palestine to Europe, although the Hebrews were more numerous and were divinely promised greatly increased numbers. Perhaps the answer to the confusion is that the Hebrew language is a Phoenician dialect and that the two are virtually identical, but as well we'll see a great multitude of the Phoenician-speaking early European colonists have been shown to be Hebrew. Famed historian George Rawlinson commented, "The Tyrians, Phoenicians, conceded to the Israelites a participation in traffic which they had carried on for so long a time with the nations of the West. 2 trading fleets were formed, to which each of the 2 nations contributed both ships and men. Phoenicia 101-102 from their trading colonies then grew and developed early European cities. Language link. In the 18th century, historians discovered exciting proof of Phoenician Celtic ties. An ancient Roman dramatist, Titus Macius Pilatus, died in 184 BC, wrote a play, The Penniless, in which he placed then current Phoenician into the speech of one of his characters. In the 18th century, linguists noted the great similarity between that Phoenician and the early Irish Celtic language. In the adjacent box is a sample given by historian Thomas Moore's History of Ireland, showing the connection between these languages. Leading 18th and 19th century scholars such as General Charles Vallancey, Lord Rosse and Sir William Betham also wrote on the subject. Vallancey, for instance, speaks of the great affinity found in many words, nay whole lines and sentences of this speech, between the Punic, Phoenician and the Irish. Famed historian George Rawlinson added that this and other inscriptions are readily explicable if Hebrew be assumed as the key to them, but not otherwise. Phoenicia, page 327. The similarity between the early Irish Celtic and the 2nd century BC Hebrew Phoenician language is shown by the Penniless of Platos, Phoenician of Platos. Baith laim mo, thaim nikothi ner ek antidesk machon. Yis aidu Ibram thif laith Keith la chon tepli ula. Early Irish Celtic. Bith lomo thim noketh nilak antidere me coin. As I delibrium tafak lith chiles contemplua Allah. In 1772, General Charles Vallancey, a leading Irish scholar of the day, published his famous work, Essay on the Antiquity of the Irish Language, being a correlation of the Irish with the Punic Hebrew language. In his opening remarks he states, on a correlation of the Irish with the Celtic, Punic and Phoenician and Hebrew languages, the strongest affinity, nay a perfect identity in very many words, will appear. It may therefore be deemed a Punic Celtic compound. Vallancey continues, from the Hebrew proceeded the Phoenician, from the Phoenician the Carthaginian or Punic was derived from the Aeolian, Dorian and Etruscan, and from these were formed the Latin. Of the Roman Saxon capital letters, the Irish use but 3. All others bear a very great resemblance to the primitive Hebrew and Phoenician. Modern language scholars have confirmed that there is a definite connection between the Celtic and Hebrew, as we have shown in our tract Hebrew and English. Religious links. Since it is true that Hebrews and Phoenicians migrated to Europe in large numbers in ancient times, there must be religious and cultural ties. In fact, such connections abound. Dr. Thomas Moore's History of Ireland, page 40, relates that most common of all Celtic monuments, the cromlech, is to be found not only in most parts of Europe, but also in Asia, include Palestine. Not less ancient in general among Celtic nations was the circle of upright stones, which I've seen everywhere in Scotland, with either an altar or a tall pillar in the centre, and, like its prototype at Gilgal, ancient Israel, serving sometimes as a temple of worship, sometimes as a place of national council or inauguration, the rough, unhewn stone used in their circular temples by the Druids was the true or orthodox observance of the divine command delivered to Noah. If thou wilt make an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. Exodus 20:25. Dr. Buford in Druidism Revived said, it's remarkable that all the ancient altars found in Ireland, and now distinguished by the name of cromlechs or sloping stones, were originally called Bothel, or the house of God, and they seem to be of the same species of those mentioned in the books of Genesis, called by Hebrews Bethel, which is a name signification as the Irish Bothel. The Bible indicates that Hebrew kings were crowned either standing upon or next to the pillar of stone. The practice of seating a new king upon a stone at his initiation was the practice in many other countries of Europe. The monarchs of Sweden sat upon a stone placed in the centre of 12 lesser stones, and in a similar kind of circle the kings of Denmark were crowned, common in both European Celts and Hebrews. And that's what got me thinking about the Stone of Destiny in Scotland. We've got the Stone of Destiny, the Stone of Scone, and every king of Scotland was anointed on that stone. And I looked more into it, and apparently it was the stone that Jacob fell asleep upon when he seen the ladders, the angels going up and down from heaven. Was it Jacob's ladder? So that's a funny connection, how Scotland has this stone. Anyway, the book Identity of the Religions, Druidical and Hebrew adds circular temples abound in England and other parts of Europe. The most ancient account of them is to be found in the book of Exodus, and Moses builded an altar under the hill and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes. In Europe, Stonehenge, Avebury and many other Celtic sites were designed in a circular pattern. Groves were also featured on both Hebrew and Celtic worship. The Bible tells us that Abraham called on the everlasting God, Genesis 13:4, from a grove planted by his own hand. Gideon worshipped God under an oak tree. The division of time into a 7-day week was practiced by the Irish Celts, identical to the Hebrews. Dr. Thomas Moore comments that no other nation kept a hebdomadal 7-day cycle except only among the family of Abraham, a remarkable proof of identity between the two peoples. Since early times, the Israelites sinned against God by adopting many of the pagan practices of their neighbours, and so we find evidence of both Hebrew and Canaanite culture among the descendants in Europe. The Phoenician is the eastern branch of the Canaanite people. The ancient Baal pillar shown left is one of many religious monuments which have been found from the Middle East to Ireland. There's even more connections. There are many other examples, however, of customs linking the Celtic Druids specifically with Israel. English historian William Borlass, in his Antiquities of Cornwall, presented many pages of such evidence. Druids worshipped but one god and allowed no graven images, identical to the Hebrews, and in contradistinction with almost other ancient religions. Consecration was sprinkled with blood, and in the Old Testament Hebrew worship, Druid priests would be clothed in white, similar to the Hebrew priests. White ephod, sacrificial victims were bled to death, and the blood was collected in the basins which served to sprinkle the altars. Bulls were sacrificed, and the image of the bull, heraldic sign of the Hebrew tribe of Ephraim, were carried into war while they performed their horrid rites of human sacrifice. The drums and the trumpets sounded without intermission, and the cries of the miserable victims would not be heard. The Druids used a magic wand in imitation of Moses' rod, poured libations, sacrificed upon the top of rocks, investigated truth by lots, anointed rock pillars with oil, and marked out boundaries with stones. In these, so many of the distinctive ways the religious customs of the Celts and Hebrews bear an unmistakable resemblance. In Holyrood, Scottish Parliament, holly, the holly tree, and rood means red. Holy red, rood. Edinburgh, Eden, Borough, Edom, Eden. There's definitely some kind of connection with the Israelites and the Celtic peoples. So guys, if you've got Celtic connections, you could be from this branch. If it's true, I'm not sure, but it could be a massive link to what's going on in the world today. So I'll make another video and read you the rest of this stuff. Right, okay guys, I'm back again for another part. I can only do these videos in 10 minutes parts, so let's have a look at the geographical link. The early name of the southern western England was Dumnoy, or Danmoni, as shown by a portion of the map in Celtic scholar John Rhys' book, The Early Celtic Britain. This comprises today the British countries of Cornwall and Devon. Highly respected historian William Camden remarked concerning Cornwall, that region, which according to the geographers is the first of all Britain, and was in ancient times inhabited by those Britons whom Solinus called Dunmonai, Ptolemy called Damonai, or as we find in other copies, more Truly the Moni, which name derived from the ever-continuing mines of tin in this tract, which the Britons called Monya, Britannia, p. page 183. This compound word is therefore composed of Monya, a tin mine, and Dan, the people who mined the tin. So the most ancient region of England is probably called Danmoni, meaning Dan's tin mines. That these early inhabitants known as Dan were in fact the biblical tribe by name. The name has been established by leading modern scholars such as Cyrus Gordon, as shown in our tract Ancient Hebrew Sea Migrations. If these early colonists had actually been Phoenicians, the region would have been called not Damroi but Phenemoni, because the Phoenicians were known as the Punic or the Phenai civilization. Celtic scholar John Rees gives strong evidence of Hebrew colonization of the British Isles in ancient times. Ireland was known as Iberion, he says. The ancient name of the Israelites was Ibre or Iberi, modern Hebrew, which is derived from the name Eber or Heber, an ancient ancestral patriarch of the people. Mr. Rees continues, in Ireland it was Iverne in Ptolemy's time, and he mentions in a town called Inverness. God, Scotland's got a place called Inverness, and the river Iverneos. These are quite common. Iver is quite a common word, Scottish, or Inverleithen. To these may be added various forms of the name of the island, such as Juvenal's Lurna, distorted more usually by the Romans into Hibernia. Their Epinoia's ancestor is variously called Eber, Emma, or Heber. So, when we get this word Celt or Celtic, it's a Roman word. The people of that day didn't refer to themselves as Celts or Celtics. They called themselves Iberi or Hebere, like Hebrews, Eber or Heber. Dr. Rees discusses a region just in the vicinity of St David's or Minua called in the Welsh Chronicle Moni Iodurium, which contains an allusion probably to the same people. Rees says that some scholars suggest this word Ludorum or Judorum may relate to the Jutes, a Germanic tribe in northern Europe, but what he believes such a view incorrect. Instead, Rees indicates that it identifies Hebrews of the tribe of Judah. Rees adds, lastly, we seem to have a trace of the same form in the Welsh Chronicle. Sometimes it's called Annales Cambria. When it calls Menevia or St David Moni Luderium, we need not be there troubled by the loss of the 10 tribes of Israel, but it would be hard to prove the contrary. Rees also discussed early Celtic names and suggests that we compare Semitic names, compare the Hebrew. So that was a geographical link. We've got a historical link here as well. One last fascination connection with the ancient Israel is suggested by Professor Rees, who says the Celtic Cymri were for some time indifferently called Cambria or Cumbria, the Welsh word on which they are based being as now written Cymru, and that is pronounced early as Englishmen would treat if it was spelled Cymri or Cymri. As students of Old Testament history will know, Cymri or Cymri is the name of the Israelites in the Assyrian text. The virtual identity is spelling and sound between the Israelite Cymri and the Celtic Cymri is too much of a coincidence not to have a relationship. Taken with the many evidences, religious and cultural, the connection between the ancient Hebrews and Celts is too strong to be ignored. In fact, it is no longer a question of did Hebrews settle in Europe in ancient times, but only a question of how many of the people of Europe are of Hebrew descent, when considering the great numbers of early Israelites and the biblical promise of multitudinous seed. Genesis, Exodus, Jeremiah, all these, you can check all these out. It is evident that the Hebrew-Celtic connection is very significant. Irish history records 3 main waves of colonisation to that isle in ancient times. The Firbolgs, of whom little is known, the Tuatha de Danann, meaning the tribe of the Dan, Tuat means tribe, and the Milesians. The later two peoples are known to have originated in Asia and may have been related. The story of Ireland by A.M. Sullivan tells us that this Milesian colony were an eastern people. They had passed from land to land from the shores of Asia across the wide expanse of southern Europe. bearing aloft through all their wanderings in the sacred banner which symbolised to them at once the origin and their mission, the blessing and the promise given to their race. This celebrated standard, the sacred banner of the Milesians, was a flag on which was represented a dead serpent and the rod of Moses. The Milesians trace their ancestry to Gadalius, whose father was the king of Scythia. Interestingly, Gad was a son of the patriarch Jacob, and his descendants formed one of the tribes of Israel. The Greek word Scythia is derived from Semitic Scythia and the Persian Saka, which in terms of the Israelites. See our track, the real diaspora. As if this wasn't enough coincidence, the serpent symbol was a family heraldic emblem of the Israelite tribe of Dan, whose descendants have been traced by leading modern American archaeologist Cyrus Gordon to the Tuatha De Danann of early Ireland. So there you go. So anyone that doubts that there's a connection between Hebrew and the Celtic culture need to do some research. The fascinating thing about all this is probably why we have all these things going on in the world. Is why, like, if you think that and you wonder, why does America back Israel? Why do they put so much money behind them? Well, I think all the leaders of these countries think they trace their bloodlines through this. Certain bloodlines are stronger. Certain bloodlines have been lost altogether. But I think these inbred ones think they're the real rulers of this world, where I think there's another cluster of people that don't know that they're actually connected to this as well. They've lost their identity, apparently. But I don't think it's spread from the Middle East through Western Europe. I think it started in Europe and spread to the Middle East, and they probably got kicked back out again. Because to be honest, if we had dark people coming over here and trying to rule us, how long would it last for before we went, wait a minute, these dark people are telling us how to live? We'd probably chase them out, along with their beliefs, their customs, whatever. And I think that's what's happened to them as well. They've been the Exodus was just them getting kicked out, because they probably were an intelligent, powerful race of people, the Northern Europeans. Probably a lot different from what they were used to. And if you look at, like, was it The King and I with Sean Connery and Michael Caine, or one of these films, he was a mason, a soldier, and the tribe sees him and they see the symbol in his neck, and right away they start worshipping him like a god. I wonder if the Celtic peoples spread from Britain through Europe, came across the Middle Eastern people, had different technology, different language, looked different, and maybe the Middle Eastern people worshipped them to some degree, thought they were maybe even like aliens or demons or angels. But they probably got sick of them eventually and chased them out. But our language is a mysterious thing. English is mysterious. Gaelic, the Gaelic language should be studied before it totally fades away. Scotland's, it's getting lower and lower, the Gaelic language in Scotland. And Welsh, it's still pretty strong, but Scotland is a fading language. Anyway, guys, I'll make one more video just to wrap this up, like as a summary, and we'll see you in the next part. Okay, guys, so I'm back again. Just going to wrap this wee one up. But it's interesting. You should do your own research. And like I said, this, like all the scriptures, the Bible, all this stuff, it could be rewritten by the people who's controlling us. But I think at the end of the day, these people believe in their books, whether you like it or not. Just like the devil, whether you think it's a ridiculous concept or not, there's people out there that believe it. So you've just got to understand that. Anyway, back to the summary. Therefore, we can say that in all of these and in a multitude of other ways, the Celts and Hebrews bear a remarkable relationship. Since the Celts were spread over most of Europe, the cultural, historical and theological implications of this truth are immensely significant. You've got a link here. Goldstein found that there was a strong Scandinavian genetic influence among 71 islanders that were examined, evidence that there was plenty of Viking blood among the now far from fierce islanders. But when examining the Celtic credentials of Orkney's males against the Welsh and Irish control groups, the scientists stumbled across a remarkable similarity in the gene patterns passed down the male line. The similarities suggest that the populations of the so-called Celtic fringe of the British Isles shared Y chromosome characteristics that predated the 5th century Saxon invasion of the islands. This was confirmed when the geneticists compared the Irish and Welsh samples with those of Basques, an ancient people inhabiting the border regions between Spain and France. The study concluded that the Basque, Irish and Welsh make up a Y chromosome community with members more closely related than they are to other European populations. It's amazing, eh? It's amazing. So what they're saying here is the Celts are Israelites under another name. The word Celt is the anglicised form of the Greek word Keltoi, which means the people who are different. In scriptures, all nations except the 12 tribes of Israel are referred to as Gentiles, foreigners, so the only people who are different are Israel. The word Celt is therefore another word for Israelite. The Celts are part of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, as are the Tuatha De Danann and Milesians. The Irish people are a mixture of Celts, Danans, Milesians, Judah, Zerites of the Red Hand. This is where you get the Red Hand, the Ulster from. Genesis, Dan, Ish, Vikings and Norsemen, and are all racially cousins. Deuteronomy, for thou art an holy people unto the I am thy God, and I am hath chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself, above all the nations that are upon the earth. Special, different, Oxford Dictionary. Genesis 38:28. And it came to pass, when she travailed, that the one that put out his hand, and the midwife took and the bond upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, This came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out, and she said, How hast thou broken forth? Why hast thou made his breach against thee? Therefore his name was called Phares, breach. 38:30. And afterwards came out his brother, that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zara, scarlet. Please see the true origin of the Ulster flag. Therefore, the Celts, according to God, are Israelites. The Irish Celts are held 3 sacred assemblies every year at Tara during Beltane, Lugnas and Samhain, which assured an abundance of corn and milk, freedom from conquest, the enjoyment of righteous laws, comfort in every house, fruit in great abundance, and plenty of fish in their lakes, rivers and estuaries, exactly as God guaranteed to Israel in the Torah, Tara, if they kept the covenant. Also during the feast of Tara, the kings of Ireland used to settle the affairs of Ireland for 7 years, so the debts, suits and adjustments used not to be submitted for judgment until the next feast. 7 years later, which the Torah calls the year of the I Am's release, when all debts were forgiven every 7 years. This proves that Irish Celtic law was based on the Torah and is further confirmation that the Celts are Israelites. And here's some scripture stuff here. Also, the word British is not English, it is Hebrew. This is what Brit Am has been talking about. Brit, Beret, means covenant in Hebrew and Welsh. Ish means man of the people of in Hebrew and English. Therefore, British means people of the covenant. In other words, the people, Israel, of the covenant. The Irish people have rejected the English Davidic monarch and its anti-covenant laws, and that is good, very good. However, the Celtic Irish people are Israelites descended from Jacob, Israel's 5th of his 12 sons, who was called Dan and fathered the Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of Dan, the Irish and the Danish. Therefore, the Irish people are Celtish, British Israelites by birth, i.e. people of the covenant in the Torah and the Bible in the Ark, which is buried at Tara. Reject the House of Windsor anti-covenant and therefore illegal laws by all means possible, but do not reject your birthright as Israelites and British people with your own emblem, the War Queen of Ireland with trident and olive twig, Tea Tepe. Tefe symbolised by Britannia, the 6th century BC Queen of all Ireland. If you reject your birthright as Israelites, you are insulting God, who gave your birthright to you along with the covenant. Ireland is called Hibernia from Heber, the great-granddad of Abraham, who was the granddad of Jacob, Israel, from whom the Celts are descended. Hibernia, Ireland, which means Hebrews' new land. Iberia, Spain, means Hebrews' land. The Basque, Galician, Austrian, and Guipuscoan Celts are your cousins. Okay guys, I'm back for the last part of this video. Like I said, it's a very interesting subject, but it's so vast. If I was to make a really detailed video here, it would be hours and hours long. I couldn't go through everything. But anyway, I'll go through the whole Baal worship, and you can see maybe why there's a connection with this whole Baal. You've maybe noticed it popping up quite a lot. But the religious customs of the covenant people became corrupted with the religion of the Phoenician Canaanites. The prophet Elijah's challenge of the Hebrew priests of Baal is one of the most moving Bible accounts. The Bible indicates that at one time the majority of Hebrew priests and people followed the rituals of Baal worship. Noted 19th century antiquarian Sir William Betham made an exhaustive study of the ancient Celtic peoples and states in his book The Gael and the Cimbri, Baal has been the precise meaning in Gaelic as in Phoenician, the Lord of Heaven. Many customs harken back to Palestine as well. Even the cakes which the idolatrous Jews in imitation of the Phoenicians made in honour of the Queen of Heaven are still the most popular cake in Ireland under the old name of the barnbrack or speckled cake. Ancient customs and rituals are persistent among mankind, and in Ireland on the eve of the summer solstice and the equinoxes to the Phoenician god Baal, and even called Baal's fire, Ballantines, though the object of a veneration be forgotten. In addition, archaeological proofs point to a Hebrew Phoenician origin of the Britons and the Irish. Betham relates on a altar stone dug up near Kirby Thor in Westmoreland is this inscription: Dio bel atugado. Sorry guys, I'm not doing this any justice. Dio bel atugadro liberum votum fecit olas. I take it this is freedom anyway, I didn't ken. The text translates as follows: To the god Baal, the friend of man, Lolus made his free vow. Aye. That's the only part I understood of liberum, free. Numerous other stone altars to the Phoenician gods, which have been discovered in Britain, Ireland and Gaul, are discussed and translated in Betham's work. Some of the principles finds include altar stones found in Northumbria and other parts of Britain. He states that these ancient monuments to Baal by the ancient British are unswearably evidences of the identity of the people of the two islands, Britain and Ireland and Gaul, which the most unwilling, incredulous cavalier etymologies can scarcely refuse to revive as conclusive. It proves more, for it shows an identity of deities of the Celtai and the Hebrew Phoenicians. Numerous other parallels exist between Celtic and Hebrew Canaanite worship, including mystic well worship, worship of sacred stones, and the veneration of the autumnal equinoxes. In fact, both the Canaanites and Celts practice autumnal sacrifices to Baal, which the Celts called Baal Tins, as previously mentioned. So you can read this, guys. I'll just slowly hang way through it. There's Moloch. This is where all the Freemasonry comes down as well. These are all the gods that the Freemasons worship. So, is this the big secret? Is this why Freemasonry is so rooted in Jewish mysticism? Because they practically are the same thing. It's just that it seems to be that it's different tribes have got mixed up differently. Different tribes have different reasons. So here's some similarities between. Here's an English word, the Hebrew word, the Gaelic word, and the Korean word. So English word jewel. The Hebrew word is kli. The Gaelic is klijin. See, Hebrew and Gaelic seem similar in the English. Korean bosak. English is gold. Hebrew is zahab. In Gaelic it's Canak. Knowledge, Dahath, Aithne, Athne. Language, Lashon, Lor Clare. Hill, Har, Ardan. But you can see there's quite a lot of similarities. God, Elohim, Yi, Yanayim. Why is Korea here? I wonder if the Celtic culture spread as far as China and Japan and Korea, because that was another thing that got me thinking about the whole red hair gene and the Celtic bloodlines. I wonder how far they got around the world, because Genghis Khan, he was apparently red haired. It's the rarest hair colour in the world. Only 2% of the world has the red hair gene, so it's quite easy to trace. I'm sure Egyptian mummies were discovered with red hair. In Russia there's red parts. So this red hair gene seems to be something that pops up quite a lot in the Gaelic language, and you can go beyond the whole scriptures and look at it from a linguistics point, an anthropology point, just culturally, because some things can be easily manipulated, but there's other things that can't be manipulated. When you look in the mirror, unless they give you plastic surgery inside the womb, you can't deny what you see in the mirror. Just like if an African person looks in the mirror and they see they've got black, thick hair, they've got dark skin, well, wouldn't they think, why have I got dark skin and why have I got thick black hair? Well, it's to protect them from the sun, because they come from warm areas. And it's the same if you look in the mirror and you've got pale skin and red hair or fair hair. Why is that? It's because of the environment you were in, because your ancestors were from colder climates. So this whole idea that if there was such a thing as Israel, it's been in the Exodus, well, I think they could have been the imposters in the first place. I think they went over, tried to spread their religion and got kicked out, and now it's been a war to get it back ever since. We've been wanting that part of the world ever since. And a lot of Celtic countries, I think a lot of European countries don't know this, because no one will explain it like this. It's just Zionism or Nazism, or people can't really show you why they feel they've got this tie with the whole Celtic. The Americans, it says in the Bible that the Israelites would rule the world, which has happened, and they said they would spread them to the four corners of the world. Well, look at Australia, look at Canada, look at South Africa, America. So, and they're controlling the world. We control the world. So prophecy is kind of coming true here. But it's not that the prophecy was predicting the future. It's that we're making the prophecy come true. We're reading the book. It's like an instruction manual. And it makes you wonder that these, like the potato famine in Ireland and the crofters, the crofters getting uprooted. What was the Highland clearances? That was what it was called, the Highland clearances in Scotland, when they cleared out loads and loads of families, and families had to go to Canada, had to go to Australia, had to go to America. But I wonder if this was a deliberate attempt to spread the Israelites genetics to the four corners of the world, because that was said in the Bible. So it's like they're wanting this to happen. They're following the instructions in the Bible. They've spread our genes to the four corners now. So I think a lot of these things, like the potato famine, the Highland clearances, they were deliberately invented to move mass amounts of people, because you couldn't just ask them to move to America. Especially Scottish people, they're stubborn. Well, you create a crisis and then you move them. Same with Australia and the prisoners. In Britain, you just had to fart near a noble and you were arrested and sent to Australia. They were just looking for any excuse to move you over there. Why? Why would they move so many peoples over the whole world? Because I think they're trying to follow the prophecy. And God help us if the prophecy comes true, because they talk about the end of days, when all these tribes eventually come back together in Israel, reunite, and then Jesus returns, and that's the end of the world. Fuck. Again, even if we have got a connection here and we realise it, let's just hope we didn't reunite and end the world. Anyway, guys, I've tried to give you an idea of what I was going on about in my previous videos. I think you should look into this and you'll probably get a better idea why the things that happen in today's society happen. Why there's this push for Islam, why all these things are happening. Okay guys, take care.